I do think that there are some fundamental things to understand about this whole stadium thing, all right? The big thing that stands out about the Texans and their stadium situation is not only how it's funded, but how it's maintained.
Yes.
Right? Like, and the thing that I don't think people understand, because it's kind of boring, but you do need to understand, is that the Texans are not, while they like pay rent to the county for the stadium, they are not in charge of maintenance and renovations at the stadium.
Which is a fair point to make.
They control over those things, okay? And that has some historical context dating back to the Astrodome and the fact that the Astros did, and the prevailing sentiment at the time, and I think even history would support this, is that the Astros did a poor job of maintaining the Astrodome. So when you fast forward to NRG Stadium, or at the time Reliant Stadium, the county situated their agreement, the lease that is now about to be renegotiated and up in 7 years, to where the county is in charge of maintaining and I guess even renovating the stadium. Everything that the Texans, you could say, want to do.
And it's worth noting that's a unique stance. Most situations, it is incumbent upon the primary tenant to maintain the building.
It's not even unique to the NFL. It's unique to the city. Because if you go over and look at Toyota Center and Minute Maid Park, it is not that way. The billionaires that are in charge of those teams, that own those teams, are in charge of those stadiums and the renovations to those stadiums. So the big thing that needs to happen, and I think that Mike Tomon, who spoke earlier with Payne and Pendergast on our station, I think is in these negotiations, figuring out a way to where the Texans and the rodeo have more control, despite the fact that they paid little, next to nothing in rent, but they have more control of the maintaining and the renovating of, and even the calendar of the state, that they are able to make more money off the stadium, and also that they would be on the hook to put more money into the stadium.
And I feel that's going to be the entry point to totally redoing the lease. That's why I've been saying it isn't going to be 7 years. It's not. Just not.
That's why he talked about getting. That's what he means by getting ahead of it.
Yeah, that's the entry point of like, look, we're willing. We want to do this, maintenance, etc. But so in other words, we got to redo this whole deal. And oh, by the way, maybe a renovation or a rebuild is part of that as well.
Yeah, and I don't buy into like NRG being some kind of structural monstrosity. It's got some issues, right? Like that, y'all talked about it, that roof, the scoreboard, Reggie, that you mentioned, the big video board is figuratively speaking hanging by a thread, from what I understand.
In addition to that, I think the thing that makes that tough is you go, well, why not repair it? I think it's antiquated. I don't know that it's a Mitsubishi board, and I'm not sure that you have like modern pieces in order to renovate it.
And that's a big part of it. So you need a new board. They want to update their suites and their, I would imagine, like
field
their
level,
club level,
lower
level, club level, all of that type of stuff. They want all of that to be nicer. Those are things that I think you could do with renovations. You don't necessarily need a new stadium to do that. Where I think it gets complicated, Lopez, and the quiet part that I don't feel like we really want to say out loud, or is uncomfortable to say out loud about this when we talk about the experience around NRG Stadium, is that it's not just the building itself, the structural building itself.
Preach, as people like to say.
That it's
the business district that is not there.
It is not a destination part of town. It is not a place, if we're just being honest about it. And I'm saying this is somebody.
That's what I've been saying for a long time. That area.
Hey, I grew up, I'm B.Scott from Hiram Clark, right? I could ride my bike from my house to NRG. My parents on Holly Hall. Like, I have an affinity for that area. But if we're being honest about it, no one really goes there for any other reason other than if they're just going there for a Texans game or rodeo or whatever's being had at the stadium. And you ideally want that area to be more of a destination or more convenient to the people that actually go to the games.
Correct.
So where do those people live? Might we want to build a stadium out there, wherever there is, right? And I'm not pretending to know what the answer to that is. But those are the questions that they have to ask, and that's where I think it gets complicated. Yes, we need to renovate the stadium. The stadium's almost 30 years old, and we're negotiating at least 7 years out.
Yeah.
But also, do we really want to be here?
Well, exactly, and that's why I say this is a strategy. and it's a smart strategy. I totally agree. I'd do the same thing if I were in their place. Hey, let's talk about renovation. Let's talk about the roof. Let's talk about the scoreboard. Let's talk about the lower bowl. You know what? That adds up to about $1.5 billion. Why don't we just get a new place? Because we also need this outside. We need to make a destination point, and we're helping you because the entire area around NRG Park is going to be, rebuilt. Like downtown, people forget this. Y'all remember this?
Yes.
Yeah. Was a dump.
Correct.
Yes.
An absolute. Don't even go there at night.
It's why I didn't know anything about it as a kid.
People from Hiram Clark thought it was nasty.
Oh, yeah, no.
Wait, what are you doing right there? Hold on. Wait a minute. Did you hear that?
No, I heard.
Okay.
I see what he did there.
All right.
It was. I worked downtown. Well, I didn't go in the office very often, but I worked downtown at the Chronicle building. You had to get security guards just to get out to your car a block away. It was a dump, and that's what the Texans and we will totally redo the entire area, and people will come in.
Allow me to be a simple man for just a second. It feels like either one or two things needs to happen here, or is going to happen, could happen here.
Yeah.
Either the Texans are angling to build a new stadium out somewhere that is either quote-unquote
strategizing.
Nice. Strategizing.
We determined that angling might be a bad connotation.
Okay, strategizing. Strategizing to build a stadium, either name your destination, the burbs, downtown, whatever it is, or NRG Stadium in the area, essentially the area around it, needs to be gentrified.
Exactly.
And I'm not advocating.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, from the Texans' perspective, or from the, let's say, pro stadium experience perspective,
Correct.
It feels like one of those two things needs to happen.
Yes.
And
or is going to happen.
But I'm glad that you brought this conversation in the way that you did, because I don't think I've done a good job of framing it. So I really do appreciate your help here. And I do think that management aspect of it is a huge one. I do think that is the part that I'm 100% fully behind, is like the Texans and Rodeo having an opportunity to take ownership of the opportunity to upgrade the stadium, because I know that there's probably a frustration from their side that has not been voiced nearly enough, in that they now have to wait for the city, and I guess let me put this another way, they have to wait for government bureaucracy to determine that something needs to be upgraded before it gets done. And when I said it like that, does that give anybody any level of encouragement?
They have to jump through hoops.
Right.
They really do, just because they got to go to the county commissioner. They got to go to all these other areas, avenues to just get. Hey, we need the parking lot.
It is. Tell me what y'all think about this comparison. Imagine being rich, but you live in the projects, right? And when I say the projects, I just mean government housing, right? Like you're rich, but you are kind of like where you live has been built for you, and it is maintained for you. And it is government housing. But what do we know?
Yeah.
Government housing is not as nice as rich people housing.
It's just more layers on when you get something done. Hey, man, something falls apart. Do you just run to Home Depot, or do you have to call some level of somebody who has to leave a message, and then they have to get in touch with somebody else? You know what I mean?
What's the other side of that, though? Should rich people be in government housing?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So, like, this is kind of needs a meeting of the minds here of, like, hey, we're the rich folks. We know this, right? Local governments have a tough enough time maintaining and funding the stuff that's actually important, much less a big-ass stadium that billionaires are profiting on, which, by the way, and I love the McNairs, but they make more off of taxes than they pay in rent over there, 6 of the last 7 years.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, like, this is a thing where, again, to the point of rich people in government housing.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of feels like. Maybe we make the rich people kind of like just pay for the stuff.
Oh, I think
some
ultimately
of the stuff.
I think
or they could try to get the best of both worlds, where they're like, hey, y'all pay for some of these renovations and give us the control to now maintain the stadium going forward.
But then
they could do that
to be able to then rent out the dates and bring more concerts and those things and pocket those things, which is honestly in line with what a lot of stadiums have been around.
If I had to just not guess, project, end up being, you know what, we need a new stadium. It's just me talking. We need a new stadium. We're going to build the entire community around us. People are going to come, and if you build it, they will come. And we're talking businesses and industries and destination points.
And in the future, maybe casinos.
And just to make it good for you, because you're going to give us $9 billion or whatever the number ends up being, we'll take over all maintenance. We'll take over all this and pay for whatever. So I think that's probably where it'll end up, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and that would be, look, that would be probably good for everyone. The question is, what is the public appetite for Like, what does that look like exactly, and what is the public appetite to fund something like that?
Yeah.
To help fund something like that, because you know they're not going to do it on their own. You talked about it earlier, Reggie, how we subsidize all of this stuff. I just mentioned how they make more on taxes than they pay in rent.
Don't get me going. People gonna be mad at me if I actually get in that bag.
It is an interesting time. It is interesting time to monitor the next less than 7 years. I would say less than 7 years.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of complexity, and you did such a good job of breaking that down in your thoughts.
Yeah, man.
It's almost like you work for the paper.
I was gonna say we do a little news over here, so I've got a little insight into some of this.
And you touched on in the what you sent us before the show something that I said. You don't bring him in to renovate.
No, that's
just not what you do.
That's a big thing. Like he said all of the right things and sounded so good this morning on Payne and Pendergast, but at the same time you got to remember that's exactly the dude that you bring in to help you build a new stadium.
You know what he sounded like?
Not to not build a new stadium.
You know what he sounded like? And I say this with as much respect as I can muster in this moment. It was his talk points, and again, not judgment in there, just kind of how it sounded. It was very slick. It was very polished, and he knows what he has a strategy. He has something that he's working towards. It's going to be very interesting, and I use that word very frequently about me now. It's going to be of great interest to me, and I think to all of us, of where that goes with NRG Park or whatever ultimately comes in the future. Just leaving room, because they are open to all possibilities. I don't know if you heard that.
Yeah. Open to all possibilities. Yeah, sounds like a man ready to build a new stadium.
I know what I heard.
All right, you're in the loop right here on Sports Radio 6.